Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. As here as always with my co-host and Hall of Famer Steve Flink. We are back doing the Zoom session. It was great being in New York with you, meeting up for dinner. We'll give the place a free some free publicity, right? It's called Sarge's Delicatessen.
Right, right.
Great place to meet you. Our friend David also met up with us, so always great chat.
Well,
Sports.
I love getting back there. I hadn't been there, David, for so long. I used to go there regularly between 85 and 91 when I was working at World Tennis Magazine nearby. And that was one of our lunch haunts. So it was great to be back and really enjoyed having dinner with you. And it was good conversation, good fun.
Always good conversation. Now we have some work to do because we didn't record last week because I was in New York talking with you in person, but we didn't finish up the WTA Finals. And I think the last time we recorded, we were talking about Coco beating Jessie Pegula. Well, she also, en route to winning the whole damn thing, she also beat two pretty good players in Iga Swiatek, who she would what had a head-to-head record of like 1-11 against before
Yeah,
winning, and then
yeah.
also beat Sabalenka in the semis, I believe.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and then wins the final. I mean, you look back to her loss against Emma Navarro at the US Open. I don't think anyone could have envisioned her finishing the year like she did, Steve.
We've seen it a couple of brought in a new coach. First was with Brad Gilbert in the summer of 23, where she had not been playing well, and she came out of Wimbledon a little downcast, and Brad came aboard the Gauff ship, you might say, and was the captain and led her to the U.S. Open, won a couple of tournaments, and then the U.S. Open, her one and only major. And now here, after she parted ways with Brad Gilbert following this year's U.S. Open, where she lost to Navarro, as you said, then Matt Daly comes aboard. He had worked with Denis Shapovalov, and he's a good coach, well known, respected. He steps in, and now she's on another role, and that was a big win for her. That was her biggest win outside of the U.S. Open, to win the WTA Finals, and it's going to carry
And
her into
beating who she beat, Steve. Beating who she
yeah,
beat.
yeah. And the final was not as big a win, but it was a spectacular performance. It was one of the best matches of the year. Went right down to the wire, and she played a nearly impeccable third set tiebreak, winning the first 6 points and closing it out in a 7-2. It was an amazing performance from her and a much needed one. And I feel like now she'll go into the Australian Open actually with probably as good a chance as anyone to win that tournament. I mean, Sabalenka's won it the last 2 years. She's still the favorite. But I would say on form, you might say Coco too, ahead of Iga, who has not played that well in Australia over the years. So it's going to be very interesting to see what that WTA Finals triumph will do for Coco in the early stages of 2025. I think quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, because there were a lot of questions about what she was going to be doing during the offseason. We all talk about all the time, the serve, the forehand. Maybe there'd be, a lot of reconstructive type of work being done. Well, here she just won the WTA Tour Finals, like you said, maybe the biggest tournament outside the four slams. And she's, like you said, just going to have so much confidence going forward. We'll see how this leads into 2025 and into the first major. So, um, impressive, very impressive to say the least. Now we go on to the men's side, Steve, and Turin. Novak withdraws a few days before the tournament starts. For the first time since 2001, no Big Three member played in the ATP Finals. That's remarkable. I mean, here we are in 2024, and we're talking since 2001. That's the first time that's ever happened. A few themes.
Interesting with Djokovic, though, David, just a quick comment. He did say when he pulled out of the tournament that it was dealing with, quote, an ongoing injury. So I just feel like that maybe the knee is still, he's trying to make sure he gets that knee as sound as he can make it, as comfortable. He's continued to wear that sleeve over that knee ever since Wimbledon. He still managed to win the Olympics with that on, but it can't be that enjoyable to need that. And I thought there was some talk before the Open that he might get rid of it, but feeling that was very precautionary, but probably wise to shut things down after reaching the finals of Shanghai and playing that exhibition in Saudi Arabia, to say that's enough. I'm going to get myself fully fit for 2025, because he really would like to win title number 11 at the Australian Open and his 25th major in the process. So, but it was still a great tournament, even without Novak.
Three main themes stood out to me, and I'll let you, talk about those three themes and add anything else you'd like. The Carlos Alcaraz, he was under the weather. I think you could tell he was under the weather, at least the earlier part of the week. He failed to make the semis. He finishes year-end number 3, despite winning 2 of the 4 slams and the silver at the Olympics. Taylor Fritz and Jannik Sinner. Those were the 3 themes that jumped out at me. I guess we could start with you with Carlos. What'd you think of his work across the week?
Summed it up well, David. He look. He wore that nose, whatever you call that nose, that little
nose breathe thing. Yeah,
the strip,
yeah.
And over his nose to help with his breathing. He didn't complain about it. He started off with his worst match against Casper Ruud, which he lost 1-5, despite leading 5-2 in the second set. And then he got a little better when he played Andrei Rublev, and he won that in straight with a long tiebreak to close it out. I think 10-8 in the second set tiebreak. And then he didn't play badly against Zverev, where he lost in straight sets, but he was at a handicap. There's no doubt. He has enough of a challenge. This is not to knock Carlos, but if there's one place he doesn't like performing at this point in his career, here's a guy who wins the French Open and Wimbledon back to back. He's won the U.S. Open now. He's won 2 Wimbledons. He's won a French. He can play on anything. But indoors, he admits he's still a bit uncomfortable with the setting. So you have that challenge to start with. A year ago, he lost to Djokovic. He did make the semis, despite losing to Zverev, and he lost to Djokovic decisively in the semis. This time, he didn't make it, but really, you're right when you talk about, there's no doubt that his health was a factor. And maybe he would have won one more match. Maybe he wouldn't have. But I admire him for just going out and playing and not complaining. And one further comment on Carlos. You alluded to the rankings and Zverev. Zverev did that on quantity over quality. He had a great year, David, no doubt, to be in the finals of the French and the semis of the Australian, so close, 1 set away in each case. He was 2 sets up on Medvedev in the semis of the Australian. He was 2 sets to 1 up on Carlos in the finals of the French. Didn't win either, had a great year, and had just won the big Paris Masters 1000 tournament and looked great. Didn't lose a set before he lost to Fritz in the semis. But I have to say, I think most of us would agree, the computer rarely gets it wrong. But in this case, Carlos, you have to say he's the second best player of the year.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Main rival. And you also beat him.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, I missed that last
part.
No,
I was going to say, if you split the 4 and you're 3-0 over Sinner as well, which is a nice achievement. He's the second best player. No knock on Zverev, but Carlos won 2 majors, and I just feel like he conducted himself very well in Turin. As I say, no complaints, just got on with it. Wasn't at his best. He actually did play. Maybe his best match was not his win. I would say he played even better in the loss to Zverev, but it wasn't enough to get him a victory.
Yeah, and we'll talk during our year-end segment. If Carlos would have graded himself over the year on a scale of 1 to 10, what grade do you think he would give himself? And you don't answer that now. We'll talk about that later.
Sure.
But again, it's hard to complain with having a year when you win 2 slams and you were, this close to winning an Olympic gold too. So
yeah, but the Olympic gold match, it was one of the 2 or 3 best matches of the year. 2 tie breaks against Novak. So absolutely, he was disappointed because he felt he played well enough to win, but Novak was better in the clutch. But still, he'd take this year. He'll take his 2 slams. I think he's pretty happy with that.
For sure. Taylor Fritz, I mean, we got to give major props for Taylor. I mean, he finishes now, 4th? He finishes year-end number 4. First ATP finalist since James Blake in 2006, the ATP Finals. He made the finals. That made no sense what I just said, but everyone understood what I was saying. He made the finals of the ATP Finals for the first time since James Blake did it in 2006. 10 top 10 wins this year. And by the way, Sasha Zverev would be okay if Taylor went away for a while, because Taylor beat him in 3 huge, I think in Laver Cup too. We're not even going to talk about Laver Cup, but he beat him in 3 huge matches, Steve. Wimbledon, U.S. Open, and in the ATP Finals.
Yeah, and don't forget that Wimbledon was probably the most jarring to Zverev because he was 2 sets up in that match, just as he'd been against Medvedev in
Think
Australia.
Zverev was a little hurt in Wimbledon. I just want to throw
Yeah,
that out there.
maybe, but still, I don't know if that was the primary reason. He had a knee issue. He'd hurt
Yeah.
it in an earlier round, but still, he's up 2 sets. He had to be very disappointed he couldn't close that one out. He lost a couple 4 sets at the Open against Taylor, but a couple of them were tie breaks, including the 4 set was a tie break. Didn't play the tie breaks well, and interestingly enough, that was the same issue in Turin, where he lost the first set, lost his serve for the only time in the tournament. He'd gone through the round robin 3 matches without losing his serve, and he finally lost it against Fritz. But he comes back, wins the second. They go to a third set breaker, and he would admit that he really played a pretty bad tiebreak. 3 unforced errors. Taylor didn't make any, and Taylor won the tiebreak 7-3 deservedly. But so my point being, if you look back on all those matches and even Labor Cup, to me, it's not just the, but it's more that Fritz has gotten in his head in the sense just keep this cumulative effect of losing to this player because he's in all these matches. He could easily won at least 2 of the 4 matches and
Big tournaments too. This is happening in big
tournaments and indoors. He's at his best, and I frankly think he would have made it much closer in the final. I still think Sinner would probably have won because he was in great form, but I do believe he would have been challenged much more severely, mainly because of Zverev's great serve indoors. I feel like that match could have been a lot closer if they had met. And that's no knock on Taylor, who had a fantastic week.
I mean, and just a great year. I mean, finalist of the U.S. Open, right?
Yeah.
Did this finals, the ATP Tour Finals. We won't say it money wise because we know she made a lot more money. Even though Taylor did quite well for himself this year, but who had the better year, Taylor Swift or Taylor Fritz? They both had really really good years. Another
Yeah.
topic we could bring up at during our year end segment. Taylor's now he was kind of going to being the hunter to now in 2025 maybe being the hunted, and to keep that top 5 ranking next year it's going to be a little bit different perspective. We all know how hard it is to keep up, especially that top ranking
Yes, but
when people are looking at you now.
no doubt, but at least a lot of the points are going to be in the latter stages of the year here. Those final round points at the U.S. Open, the final round points in Turin. He's got other things earlier in the year too, but at least it's spread out. And I think he'll make a go of it. What's interesting is you alluded to Blake in 06, and Blake gets to the finals there. Blake finished 4 in the world, just like Taylor did this year. So he's the first American to finish in the top 4 since Blake. But I believe there's more of an upside, and I think James was a magnificent player. But I do think Taylor can hold his ground. If he doesn't stay in the top 5, I'd be very surprised if we didn't see him at least stay somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 in the world, because he plays a lot. He can play on any surface. He's an increasingly sturdy competitor, and he keeps talking about how the more he's playing these guys now, he's more comfortable with it. Now, it didn't help him the second time around against Sinner, who also beat him in the round robin, but Sinner was just too good. It's not like Taylor threw his chances away. So I feel like he'll have a very good year next year. You're right that it'll be difficult to stay at 4, but if he doesn't finish that next year in the top 7 or 8, I'll be very surprised.
And he plays pretty well in Australia. He's just come up against Novak a few times at that tournament. But like you said, he plays well on every surface. So he's going to give himself a chance.
Yeah, he played one of his best matches against Novak there this year in the quarters and lost it in 4. It was a really hard fought 4-set match. You're right. He's had a lot of setbacks against Novak, who'd beaten him in the Open the previous year in the quarters. He thinks he belongs now. Now he knows.
He said that. He said that in an interview, actually, that, he's had his ranking up before, but he really kind of questioned if he deserved to be there. He recently said, now I feel like I am at that level.
He is, but the hard reality in addition to that is, as great as he's been against Zverev, beating him 4 times this year, and other top players, the big 3 of Alcaraz, Sinner, Alcaraz, Djokovic, there he's got issues because Novak beats him every time. Sinner lost to him the first time they played in 21, but since then it's been all his way. And then Carlos has been kind of a nightmare for him too. That's not to say he can never beat those guys, but they're going to be an ongoing problem. On the other hand, Taylor's still going to beat the rest of the field a lot. So I feel like you're going to see him in the latter stages of majors frequently next year and winning more titles again.
I'm laughing when you said that because you're not only speaking on behalf of Taylor, you're speaking on behalf of every person who was ranked fourth in the world for the last 20 years when they had to
Yeah,
deal with
right.
Roger, Rafa,
And
and Novak.
it's true. And I said big three, which is funny. I would say that because we know the big three has always been the, Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. But right now, I think it's kind of a new big three short term because I think Djokovic
Right.
is healthy. He's going to come right back in fighting furiously next year to win that 25th major. And he's still, to me, is better than all the rest and right in there with Carlos and Sinner. He showed that particularly in that Olympic final against Carlos.
Yeah. All right, let's finish up with Sinner, and we're going to talk Rafa at the end of this too. But Jannik Sinner, and he's won more than these titles. I'm just naming a lot of the big ones. He won Australia, he won Miami, won Cincy, he won the U.S. Open, won the ATP Finals and the U.S. Open rematch over Taylor. We said that. Um, this guy, and again, I still cannot get over watching him, and it wasn't a final match, but I still cannot get over the power. Even I wasn't there in person, you were, but I was watching on TV, and the power that you hear coming off his racket, and I'm reminiscent to that match when he played Tommy Paul in New
Right,
York.
right.
I can't believe how good he was, especially out of the corners, and how much power he has. Jannik Sinner, what a great year for
Well,
him.
that was very astute too, because you're right. I was sitting there at courtside listening to the ball come off his strings, and then you asked me to describe it. But you were onto that off the TV. It's harder to pick that up, but it's a thundering sound, and I think part of it relates to obviously it's power, but it's timing, it's execution, it's the soundness of the strokes, and that's definitely reflected there. I do think, we'll talk more about it in the year end. I'm optimistic that he's going to get, he lost all three. I feel like he's going to start winning his share again. And that rivalry is going to be spectacular.
You said he lost all three to Carlos, right? I just lost you there for a second. He lost all three.
Yeah. He lost. Yeah. He lost, obviously Sinner had a tough time because he won the first set against Carlos in Indian Wells and the final and got beaten. He was 2-1 up in the French and got beaten. And then that last one in Beijing, he's up 3-love in the tiebreak in the third set, serving at 3-love and never wins another point. So he's been close, and I think he'll be back in it. And I think the game is going to really benefit because we had the great rivalries among the Federer, Nadal, Djokovic trio for so long. But now these two, assuming Novak probably doesn't play beyond this coming year, these two are going to, for the next 5 to 10 years, they're going to captivate us.
Yeah, as long as both remain healthy, they're going to be just going after each other for the very important week as we speak. The Davis Cup is just about getting ready to start. We're doing this, Monday night, so it hasn't started yet, the live matches. But as we all know, Rafa, it's his last week. He's teaming up with Carlos and some other teammates in Spain. I just hope we all get to appreciate watching him compete, this final week, because it's been remarkable watching him ever since he stepped foot on tour.
Yeah, and he was interesting. He made a typically Rafa realistic. It just was reflective of him and this sort of flinty integrity that he hopes it. But he certainly knows he's physically prepared, and he knows the crowds are going to be fervently behind him, and hopefully we can get a few last pieces of magic from Nadal in the coming days. I sure hope so.
Yeah, this well said. This was fun. I can't wait to watch Rafa again for this final week, and we'll do this again soon with our year end and kind of wrap everything up, which is always one of our favorite episodes of the year. And that's it. You want to hit on anything else before we sign off?
No, this was fun, and I am looking forward to the year end with our other David. Always adds so much to the discussion. We bring in a youthful David. Not that you're not young, but he's even younger.
So we got 3 different generations. It's nice.
We do. No, it's great. It's great. And I think our perspective is not that different, the three of us, but our ages are, and it makes for a lot of fun in the year end talk in particular. So looking forward to that podcast.
Can't wait, Steve. Thanks again.
Thanks, David.